DC has made so many movies. So many movies. And I watched every single one of them. God, I'm tired. For anyone who wasn't aware, this is a follow-up to my video where I watched every Batman movie ever made. I'm not covering all those movies again. This video will already be insanely long as it is. But there were a bunch of movies that I only kind of touched on in that video that I'll talk about in more detail here. DC, Detective Comics. The company known for superheroes like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and honestly not a whole lot else as far as the average person is concerned. Glancing through their catalog of movies and TV, it's really clear that Batman is far and away their most popular character. He either stars in or plays an important role in more than half of all movies they've made. That was a big reason why I decided to expand on my Batman movie video and watch all the other DC movies. I had already covered a huge chunk of them, and I was kind of like, why not finish out the rest of them? But even without Batman, there are still dozens of movies I had to check out. It's taken me the better part of a year, but I finally did it. I watched every single movie ever made that's based on a DC Comics property. I'm ready to put together this absolutely massive video covering the totality of DC film, to give a complete picture of the franchise and help you pick out which ones you should watch. To recap, let me go over the various regions of DC superhero movie canon, because the majority of these don't stand on their own. In the grand tradition of superhero comics, many of these movies are connected within broader cinematic universes, small and large. It's an idea that the general public has become more familiar with thanks to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but DC has been doing this kind of thing for decades now. In the 90s and early 2000s, we had the DC Animated Universe, or the Timverse, which was a collection of connected TV shows and a few movie tie-ins. Since 2013, we've had the live-action DC Extended Universe, or DCEU, DC's competitor to the MCU. We have the DC Animated Movie Universe, or DCAMU, a series of animated movies from 2014 to 2019. And finally, we have the many DC LEGO movies that don't really have a connected canon, but are similar enough to treat as a group. Those aren't the only cinematic universes I'll be touching on in this video, but they're the big ones that are good to mention up front. And also, there are plenty of standalone movies, shorter series, and movies that tie into a particular TV show. As for the organization of this particular video, though, I decided to group movies by character. Partly because I already did Batman, and this was the easiest way to avoid redundancies, but also because it's cool to look at all the different interpretations of a character all at once. It gives a really good perspective of just how versatile some of these superheroes are in terms of storytelling. By the way, another reminder that I don't read comics, so the relationships to the source material won't affect my feelings on the movies at all. I'm going to start with, Batman. Because since I released my Batman video, more Batman movies have come out. 2 to be precise. Batman The Long Halloween, Parts 1 and 2. Boy did I feel silly when I saw this thing. I just made a video all about how hard it is to integrate a mystery into a modern Batman movie, and this movie comes out and made it look easy. It's Batman as more of a straightforward detective story. The world of Gotham felt more stripped down than usual, which gave the movie an opportunity to be more flexible the way it told the Batman story. I was very impressed. Batman Long Halloween joined the ranks of many, many other Batman movies, including Batman the Movie, Batman 1989, Batman Returns, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, Mask of the Phantasm, Sub-Zero, Batman Beyond Return of the Joker, Mystery of the Batwoman, Batman Gotham Knight, Under the Red Hood, Death of the Family, Year 1, The Dark Knight Returns Parts 1 and 2, The Killing Joke, Batman and Harley Quinn, Return of the Caped Crusaders, Batman vs. Two-Face, Batman Ninja, Soul of the Dragon, Batman vs. Dracula, Son of Batman, Batman vs. Robin, Batman Bad Blood, Batman Hush, Gotham by Gaslight, Batman Unlimited, Animal Instincts, Monster Mayhem, X vs. Mutants, Scooby-Doo and Batman the Brave and the Bold, Batman vs. the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Lego Batman Movie, Lego DC Gotham City Breakout, and Lego Batman Family Matters. All of which I've covered in enough detail already. But I'm not done with Batman in this video yet. The next section is movies starring Batman villains. Yeah, because Batman is so popular that there are several movies just based on his rogues gallery. I'll start with Joker, a movie that I think is good, but I also maintain that it barely counts as a DC movie. This version of the character has almost nothing in common with established versions of the Joker. and if you changed a few names, this could be an original standalone movie about a crazy guy in clown makeup. But this isn't the first time a DC movie has done this with a Batman villain. The Halle Berry Catwoman movie from 2004 reimagines Catwoman as a more straightforward superhero with cat powers. It has nothing to do with Batman whatsoever. He doesn't even get a mention. At least Joker had Bruce Wayne in that one scene. I don't know whose idea this movie was. Catwoman is completely unrecognizable. It seems like Warner Brothers was banking everything on Halle Berry's star power for this one, and it did not work at all. This movie is a disaster. It's mildly entertaining once in a while, but that's about it. Deathstroke Knights and Dragons is an animated movie following Deathstroke, the deadly mercenary who trained under the same masters as Batman. Again, this is a movie with no mention of Batman anywhere, but at least this is a more accurate depiction of Deathstroke, besides the fact that he's a little more noble than usual to make him work as the lead character. This is pretty much everything you'd want out of an R-rated comic book movie. Lots of cool action and animated blood and guts. Next we get to the Suicide Squad movies. If you're not familiar, the Suicide Squad is a group of captured supervillains who are forced to undertake secret missions by the government. Technically, these characters aren't all Batman villains, but the two most consistent members of the roster are Deadshot and Harley Quinn, so I think that's good enough. My first introduction to this concept was in the 2016 DCEU Suicide Squad movie, and oof. This is just a movie that does not get anything right. All the characters suck, the plot is barely coherent, it looks ugly. I have nothing nice to say about it. But on the animated side of things, DC has done way better. First, Batman Assault on Arkham, which is a tie-in to the Batman Arkham video games. Batman's name is in the title, and he is in the movie, but the Suicide Squad is positioned front and center. And in the DCAMU, there's Suicide Squad Hell to Pay. Between the two, I give Hell to Pay a slight edge, but the two movies are very similar. And if you like one, you'll like the other. And man, these movies are good. They show me just how cool and interesting this concept of a villain team can be. All the wacky team dynamics, the constant threat of a double cross, and the idea that any character could die at any moment make these movies pure fun the whole way through. I mentioned all three of these in my last video. Since then though, there's been another Suicide Squad movie, a sequel to the DCEU Suicide Squad with the confusing title of The Suicide Squad. Man, if this movie didn't top everything that came before it. I give a lot of credit to director James Gunn for shedding everything that didn't work about the first movie to create the most entertaining movie to come out this year. I loved it.
He does exactly what I do, but better.
The last movie in the Batman Villains category is Birds of Prey, a DCEU Harley Quinn solo movie. It's pretty good, although your enjoyment will highly depend on whether you find this version of the character funny or obnoxious. But I liked it. Okay, finally we can move away from Batman. Not that he'll be completely gone from this video. He'll still make smaller appearances in ensemble movies.
Somebody in here? Something wrong? Nope.
But for the time being, it's time to move on to Superman. Kal-El, Clark Kent, the last son of Krypton. He's a superpowered alien who crash-landed on Earth as a baby and grew up to be a perfect, flawless paragon of virtue. So the thing about Superman that a lot of people like to say, and that I used to think, is that Superman is boring, because he's too overpowered and too perfect. But after watching all these Superman movies, I didn't find that to be an accurate description. You can absolutely tell a good story with Superman, and I think a bad Superman story is the fault of the writer, not a result of the problem with Superman as a character. The first Superman movie ever made was in 1978, just called Superman, starring Christopher Reeve. Then after that was a series of sequels, Superman 2, Superman 3, and Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. The first one is a pretty solid introduction to the character, even if it's pretty dated and goofy by today's standards. There's a pretty consistent decline in quality with each successive sequel though. Superman 2 is still pretty good, Superman 3 is somewhat entertaining, and Superman 4 is barely watchable. Oh, there's also a Supergirl spin-off movie that's part of the same series. These movies are definitely a far cry from the modern superhero blockbuster we're used to. They're cartoonishly upbeat and cheerful, with some pretty laughable special effects. But the series wears its heart on its sleeve, and I found a lot to admire about them. There's also something kind of funny about Superman 2 that I should mention. So, Richard Donner was the director of the first movie, and he was the original director of the second one, but he had a big fight with the producers and got fired towards the end of production, and the studio hired Richard Lester to finish it. Compared to the first movie, the theatrical release of Superman 2 is a lot sillier and more slapstick, and you can totally tell that somebody different was behind the camera. But a few decades later, Warner Brothers released Superman 2: The Richard Donner Cut, made from archive footage. This This is all sounding very familiar, isn't it? This is almost the exact situation as the 2017 Justice League movie in the Snyder Cut.
Wow, if I had a nickel for every time...
There was a DC superhero movie where the original director left midway through and the new director made huge changes to the tone only for the studio to release the original director's cut of the movie.
I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
But to be clear, the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2 isn't a finished movie. Richard Donner didn't get to reshoot and re-edit footage like Zack Snyder did. This is a half-cobbled-together thing made from what they had available. And I'm sure there are people out there who love it and think it's way better than the original, but I didn't think it was that different. It's not worth your time unless you're really curious. The last movie in this series is Superman Returns, a sort of soft reboot from 2006. It's a more modern, updated version of the older classic Superman movies. I felt like a lot of the charm was lost in translation here, but it's a solid story. Warner Brothers had hoped to relaunch the whole franchise with it, but it didn't make much of an impact when it came out, so no further sequels ever happened. Now it's time to look at some animated movies. I'll start with Superman Brainiac Attacks. This is a weird one, because there's a TV show called Superman the Animated Series that's part of the Timverse. This movie sure looks like it's connected to that show. The art style is identical, but nope, it's its own thing. The plot of the movie doesn't jive with what happens in the show, and the tone is way campier. Specifically, the Lex Luthor in this movie is way cheesier.
That's right, make him come to you.
LexCorp bleeds millions every time the Man of Steel thwarts my covert plans to achieve world domination.
This movie is one of the weaker ones. It's fine for kids, but there are several better ones. All-Star Superman is a real standout in the animated Superman category. The premise is that Superman thinks he's going to die soon, so he goes around taking care of everything he needs to do before that happens. It's a mishmash of plotlines that all somehow come together really well. This isn't really a good movie to start with. The Superman in this movie has clearly been active for a while, and there are a ton of plotlines and references where it helps to have prior context for, but I definitely recommend it. In terms of sheer good writing though, it's Superman vs. the Elite that beats out every other Superman movie. It's about Superman interacting with a new team of superheroes who use more extreme measures to take on bad guys. It's easily the best exploration of the moral implications of vigilante justice I've seen outside of maybe Season 2 of Justice League Unlimited. I was very impressed. With Superman Unbound, I gotta be honest, even though I watched it, by the time I sat down to write about it, I had to look up the plot because I forgot what happened. And that says more about it than I ever could. But it's about Superman and Supergirl fighting Brainiac. Then there are 2 Superman-Batman movies, Public Enemies and Apocalypse. But Superman definitely gets top billing here. He's much more important to the story than Batman is. Public Enemies has them on the run when Lex Luthor is elected president, and Apocalypse is a Supergirl origin story mixed with some stuff with Darkseid. They're really nothing special. Then we have a whole host of movies that deal with the death and resurrection of Superman. All of the following have the same base plot. The supervillain Doomsday comes to Earth, Superman fights him, they kill each other, the world mourns and tries to come to terms with the world without Superman, but then it turns out that Superman wasn't really dead, just recovering, and he comes back to life to fight some other big threat. I got to the point where I was real sick of seeing it. First there's Superman Doomsday, which is pretty much everything I just said with no variation. Then there's a pair of movies in the DCAMU. First, The Death of Superman, which somehow stretches the Superman Doomsday fight to almost an hour before ending with his death. Followed by Reign of the Supermen, which has a bunch of Superman-like heroes stepping in to fill the void he left. And this plotline also appears in Batman vs. Superman and the DCEU Justice League movie. Superman Man of Tomorrow is the newest Superman movie, having come out in 2020. Now this is actually the start of a whole new DC cinematic universe. The DCAMU ended in early 2020 with Justice League Dark Apocalypse War, and this looks to be its replacement. Officially it's called the DC Rebirth Universe, but fans have nicknamed it the Tomorrowverse since Man of Tomorrow is its first movie. So far there are only 4 movies that are a part of it. This, Justice Society World War II, and Batman Long Halloween. And none of them have any clear crossover yet that I can tell. As for the movie itself, a lot of people online seem pretty down on it, but I was a big fan. It spends far more time than any other movie on Clark Kent revealing himself to the world and becoming a full-fledged Superman. This made it feel pretty different. It was fun to see a version of Superman who is less self-assured of himself without being all angsty. The last animated Superman movie is Superman Red Son, a DCAMU adjacent story about what would happen if baby Superman grew up in Soviet Russia instead of Kansas. Honestly, I was a little disappointed in this one. I was hoping to see some nuance here about Cold War paranoia and less clear-cut good guys and bad guys, but Communist Superman pretty much goes full-on bad guy right away. It didn't have much else to say thematically besides communism bad. But that's not to say the movie was all bad. It has some cool action, slick animation, and fun reimaginings of classic characters. I've heard that the comic is way better, so I might check that out someday. Which brings us to Man of Steel. I purposely saved this for last. Its whole elevator pitch is that it's a darker, more realistic take on Superman, which in practice means that everyone hates Superman, and Superman seems to hate everyone back. I saw Man of Steel in theaters, and at the time I thought, pretty good. But after watching all these other Superman movies, I now understand what everybody else on the internet was talking about when they said that Man of Steel doesn't understand what makes Superman work. The Superman in every other movie I watched was unflinchingly good and kind. There were plenty of instances where the public turned against him, but he never let that shake his ideals. He just kept on saving people no matter what. And that works to the movie's benefit. These stories don't treat Superman's relative character flatness as a liability, they make it work as an asset. Instead of making the really obvious point that in real life a person with these superpowers would make mistakes and do bad things, the conceit of Superman is, what if there was an ultra-powerful superhero who was perfect? What would that look like? And I think that's way more interesting. Alright, with DC's heavy hitters Batman and Superman out of the way, the rest of these movies will go pretty quick. Next up is Wonder Woman, easily their third most popular character. She's an Amazon who lived on an island full of all-female warriors before striking out on her own. The obvious place to start is her 2017 live-action movie, which I won't spend too much time on because it was really popular and most people have seen it already. But I loved it. Gal Gadot and Chris Pine have great chemistry, the action is cool, and using World War I as a backdrop was such a great idea. Its sequel, Wonder Woman 1984, was not nearly as good. I don't want to be too negative since the internet has already ripped it to shreds. It wasn't all bad, but there were a lot of weird choices made here. Here's to hoping Wonder Woman 3 is better. Wonder Woman only has 2 solo animated movies. The first was a 2009 movie just called Wonder Woman. I went into this with super low expectations because at a glance it looks pretty cheap, but I ended up liking it a lot. It's got a very similar plot to the live action movie, with Wonder Woman leaving Themyscira after Steve Trevor shows up. But the detail that stands out here is that Steve Trevor is a macho, misogynistic jerk. He provides an awesome character foil for Wonder Woman, who argues with him constantly, and even starts to wonder if humanity is worth fighting for because of him. It's so much fun.
Ow!
And lastly, Wonder Woman Bloodlines is a later entry in the DCAMU. Gotta be honest, this is another movie that I watched for this, and then immediately afterwards, every detail of it evaporated from my head. I remember Wonder Woman moving with some professor lady and her daughter at the beginning, and nothing else. That's it for Wonder Woman movies. It's kinda funny. She's in basically every DC ensemble project ever, but for whatever reason, there aren't that many movies about just her. I'll do The Flash next. Kind of. Flash is in a funny kind of position as far as movies are concerned. He doesn't really have any true solo adventures. DC really treats him as an ensemble character, part of the Justice League, instead of allowing him to be his own thing. Which I get to an extent. He's generally more of a comic relief character, and he works best with other heroes to bounce off of. That said, there are still 3 movies that have Flash in a lead role that I'm putting into this category. I'll start with Justice League The Flashpoint Paradox. And this is one of my all-time favorites. It's the first movie in the DCAMU, and has Flash going fast enough to travel through time and accidentally changing history. The movie takes place in an apocalyptic nightmare version of the DC world, and it's so cool to see the remixing of so many characters all built around the Flash as the main character. There's also Justice Society World War II, which is the second movie in the DC Rebirth universe. This is the only Justice League movie that I didn't mention in my Batman video because it's the only one that doesn't have Batman in it. It has the Flash accidentally traveling back in time to fight Nazis with World War II era superheroes, like Wonder Woman and Jay Garrick, the original Flash. That all sounds cool, but I didn't find it especially memorable. Then there's the LEGO Flash movie. And even though it's his name on the front, it features the entire Justice League too. It's your typical LEGO movie affair. It's yet another story where Flash travels in time and gets stuck in time travel related shenanigans, with plenty of goofy, kiddie LEGO humor throughout. It's so weird how all 3 of these movies include this. It's like DC thinks Flash isn't interesting enough to stand on his own, so they have to up the ante with time travel and other superheroes. Even the upcoming live-action DCU Flash movie is rumored to be going down the same road. It's too bad. I think a solo Flash movie could work. Maybe it'll happen someday, but for now it seems like he's destined to be a side character. Green Lantern is up next. He's pretty unique as far as superheroes are concerned because the character concept is incredibly flexible. So Green Lanterns are basically a group of interstellar peacekeepers who work together to help people all across the universe. Pretty much anybody can slip on a Green Lantern ring and be a lantern. So unlike most other DC heroes who only have one, maybe two people taking up that persona, there are tons of different versions of Green Lantern. And they all have way different personalities, unlike, say, the Barry Allen and Wally West versions of Flash, who are basically interchangeable. The most common one, though, is Hal Jordan. He's a former Air Force pilot who gets the ring from a lantern who crashed on Earth. In most incarnations, he's wisecracking, cocky, and self-assured. I really like his portrayal in the DCAMU.
Alright, you wanna dance? Let's dance!
But he doesn't have his own movie. The DCAMU only uses him as an ensemble character. There are 3 Green Lantern solo movies, all of which star Hal Jordan. First is the 2011 live-action movie starring Ryan Reynolds, a movie which bombed horribly. I wouldn't call it horrible or irredeemably bad, but it's pretty bad. It does a serviceable job of introducing the concept of the Green Lantern Corps, but the story and visuals are pretty flat and uninspired. It's an embarrassing effort all around.
And please don't make the super suit green. Or animated.
Green Lantern First Flight, though, is an animated movie that also serves as a Hal Jordan origin story. And it's basically the same as the live-action movie, except better in every conceivable way. I didn't know much about Green Lantern before watching these, but this is the movie that made me get what he was all about. See, the Green Lantern Corps are basically space cops. And this movie is basically a buddy cop story with Hal and Sinestro. It works really well, and Sinestro's betrayal really pulls it all together. I'd say spoilers, but come on. It's pretty heavily foreshadowed, and Sinestro is the most famous Green Lantern villain. Besides, I don't know if any spoiler warning would even make it into the video, since somebody thinks they can cut out anything they don't like. I can make you say whatever I want. Then there's Green Lantern Emerald Knights. This movie has the same look and feel of First Flight, but it doesn't appear to be a direct sequel. There are too many details that don't fit together, so officially it's a standalone. This is an anthology movie, with a bunch of short segments about other members of the Green Lantern Corps. Like any anthology, some stories are better than others, but it's pretty fun overall. It's funny, all 3 of these movies came out within the same couple years. It seems like the 2 animated movies were made as sort of promotion for the live-action movie, and when it bombed, DC gave up on Green Lantern movies entirely. He hasn't even appeared in the DCEU Justice League yet, which is weird given how he's in basically every other version of the team. So Hal Jordan was the first version of the Green Lantern character. But like I said, lots of other people have gotten their hands on a ring and taken up the mantle in the comics, and a few of them have made the jump to movies and TV as well. The second most well-known Lantern is John Stewart. Where Hal is snarkier and more carefree, John Stewart is kind of uptight and stoic. He's best known for appearing in the Timverse Justice League shows, but he also plays minor roles in Justice League Dark Apocalypse War, and Superman Red Son. Then for the last movie in the Green Lantern category, I'm including Justice League vs. the Fatal Five. This movie and Batman and Harley Quinn are basically spiritual successor films to the Timverse. None of them really fit into the canon of that universe, but they share a lot in common in terms of style and writing. The reason I'm including it is because even though it's a Justice League movie, arguably the protagonist of this movie is the Jessica Cruz version of Green Lantern. She's a more recent incarnation of the character who debuted in the comics a few years back and has skyrocketed in popularity since. I can see why. Jessica Cruz is a teenage girl who has been through a lot of trauma in her life. And at least in this movie, she received the Green Lantern ring against her will. Watching her struggle to accept the past and responsibility as a Lantern, I felt that she was one of the most relatable and compelling characters in all of DC, period. I was very impressed. And even though the movie isn't all about her, I recommend you watch it just for her. Also, Jessica Cruz appears as part of the ensemble in a couple of LEGO movies. DC Superhero Girls Supervillain High, Shazam Magic and Monsters, and Aquaman Rage of Atlantis. Speaking of which, it's time for Aquaman movies. Aquaman, aka Arthur Curry, is the half-human king of Atlantis, and he has all kinds of fish and water-based powers. Now, in the past, Aquaman has been the butt of a lot of jokes, because his powers are kinda silly. But in the last few years, he's been making a comeback, with tons of newer interpretations of the character in film. It's a funny thing, though. There are 3 movies that have Aquaman in the lead role, and they all have the exact same plot. Aquaman is the rightful ruler of Atlantis, but his evil half-brother Orm tries to overthrow him in order to wage war on the surface world. I don't get why all of them took this route, but they did, and that's what we got. I'll start with the live-action DCEU Aquaman movie, which stars Jason Momoa, reprising his role from the DCEU Justice League movie the year before. The earliest DCEU movies were insanely dark and gritty, and this was the first one to embrace a lighter, sillier tone, and it worked out pretty well. Aquaman was an unexpected hit. It's wacky and corny, but it's really unique and I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say I loved it, but I enjoyed it. Justice League Throne of Atlantis is part of the DCAMU. It's that same plot of Aquaman vs. Orm, but it also has a B-plot with the rest of the Justice League fighting Orm too. I really like this version of Aquaman, who looks like the classic campy version, but is much more serious and complex. Then there's the LEGO Aquaman movie, Rage of Atlantis. Again, same plot, but sillier and in LEGO form. It's exactly what you would expect if you've seen any other LEGO DC movie. That's it for Aquaman. Next is Shazam. Or Captain Marvel. It's complicated. I'm gonna call him Shazam because that's what the movies call him. Shazam is a kid named Billy Batson who transforms into an adult superhero whenever he says the word Shazam. Shazam comics are actually way old, but he fell out of popularity for a while, only getting back into the spotlight more recently. He only has 2 solo movies. There's the live-action DCAMU Shazam movie, which is awesome. I can't recommend it enough. It's such a fun, relatable, down-to-earth story about a kid with superpowers. You don't get that much with DC, with its aliens and billionaires and demigods getting most of the attention. It's got a light and breezy tone and strong, memorable characters. It was a big win for the DC universe at a time when it really needed one. The other Shazam movie is LEGO Shazam Magic and Monsters. It's another goofy LEGO movie about Shazam trying to join the Justice League. Oh, and Shazam also appears as a member of the Justice League in all DCAMU movies. Okay, next I'm just going to list all the miscellaneous Justice League movies that I haven't talked about in this video yet. I already covered them all in my Batman video, since Batman appears in all of them, but I want to at least mention them in the interest of completeness. Justice League The New Frontier, Justice League Crisis on Two Earths, Justice League Doom, JLA Adventures Trapped in Time, Justice League Gods and Monsters, Justice League War, Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice, Justice League and Justice League The Snyder Cut, LEGO Batman DC Superheroes Unite, LEGO Justice League vs Bizarro League, LEGO Justice League Attack of the Legion of Doom, LEGO Justice League Cosmic Clash, and DC Superheroes vs Eagle Town, which I still can't find an English version of. Then, since my last video, there's been one more ensemble movie that's come out. Injustice. It's based on the Injustice video game, and it's about Superman turning evil and taking over the world. Which other movies have flirted with, but this is the most straightforward take on that idea, I think. This movie is brutally violent, and it was a little much for me. But between that and the philosophical thematic ideas in the plot, it was something refreshingly different as far as DC movies are concerned. Next is Teen Titans movies. They're DC's group of teen superheroes who have had a bunch of iterations over the years. The most famous of which was the 2004 Cartoon Network show, which was so good. It had one TV movie, Teen Titans Trouble in Tokyo. It's basically just a longer episode of the show, so it's impossible to talk about on its own. As for the show itself, it set the standard for what future Teen Titans iterations should look like. A blend of classic superhero action with cartoon comedy and lighthearted stories. When Cartoon Network rebooted the show with the much campier Teen Titans Go, it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. It looks like a pretty huge departure from what made the first show so good. I haven't seen any of Teen Titans Go the show, but I was absolutely blown away by Teen Titans Go to the movies. It was really, really funny, and had a ton of really clever and insightful commentary on the state of the superhero genre. I highly, highly recommend. In general, I think the differences between Teen Titans 2004 and Teen Titans Go have been way overstated. And to me, that's clearer than ever when watching Teen Titans Go vs Teen Titans, the crossover movie between the two. They exist alongside each other effortlessly in this movie. It's a fun time, whether you're looking for a nostalgia fix for the old show, or you just want to see a fun superhero cartoon.
You have to absorb my powers by eating me. But I don't want to... Why can't you eat me? Because my mouth won't animate that big.
Next, let's turn our attention over to the DCAMU, where there's a pair of PG-13 Teen Titans movies that take a lot of the concepts from the TV shows in a new direction. There's Justice League vs Teen Titans, where the teen superheroes fight the mind-controlled Justice League, and Teen Titans The Judas Contract, which adapts the famous storyline where Terra joins and betrays the team. These two are some of my favorite in the DCAMU. The Teen Titans in these movies is kind of a boot camp where young superheroes and sidekicks go to hone their skills and be part of a team. There's a set team that we follow, but there are various alumni who make appearances, like Dick Grayson as Nightwing. It goes a long way towards making the universe feel lived in. Plus, both movies expertly combine superhero action and teen drama in a way that a PG kids cartoon never could.
I see him. See? I thought you were the cool, serious one, but that dude is the cool, serious one. Uh-huh.
And then there's Teen Titans Go! See Space Jam. This was a thing released on Cartoon Network to promote Space Jam: A New Legacy, which is just the movie Space Jam and the Teen Titans from Teen Titans Go! Adding commentary to it. I was very annoyed to find out that this existed, because that meant I had to watch it for this video. It was an obvious ploy to get younger kids who never saw the original Space Jam to watch it before the sequel came out. I already didn't love the original Space Jam, but watching it with Teen Titans interrupting it every 5 minutes made it pretty intolerable. And that dovetails really nicely into the next section of the video, which I guess I'll call Warner Brothers conglomerate movies. You know, the ones where Warner Brothers throws together every major property that it owns because it can.
Behold, my stuff.
There are a surprising amount of them, and inevitably they all feature DC characters to some extent. First, Space Jam: A New Legacy. It's the sequel to Space Jam with LeBron James, and takes place in a universe where all the WB properties exist together. The DC superheroes make pretty minor appearances, and only Wonder Woman gets a speaking role, but they're there. This movie is a shameless cash grab that's more of a 2-hour commercial for HBO Max than it is a movie. And by extension, I'm also including the first Space Jam as its own entry on the list. Even though it doesn't have any DC characters, it's still part of the same series. Then there are the LEGO movies, 1 and 2. The first movie mainly just has Batman, but the second part features all of the major DC heroes. I do like these movies, even if they're just big toy commercials. They're fun and well written. I also want to mention Ready Player One. I'm bringing it up, but I don't think it counts as a DC movie. It's the same kind of thing as Space Jam 2, where it throws around a bunch of licensed characters, but in this movie, they all exist inside a virtual reality video game. Unlike the previous movies, these aren't the actual characters. It's more like a high-tech version of playing with action figures, so I'm not counting it. Okay, we're getting pretty close to the end here. Next, I'll briefly touch on the DC Superhero Girls movies, which are part of the eponymous TV show. There's Hero of the Year, Intergalactic Games, Legends of Atlantis, and the 2 LEGO ones, Brain Drain and Supervillain High. These movies were made for 8-year-old girls, and I felt absolutely ridiculous watching them, but I did. They were exactly what I expected. Moving on. Now we start digging a little deeper. We talk about movies based on some really obscure DC characters, ones that the average person has probably never heard of. Next up is John Constantine. He's a demon hunter, and stories involving him are typically way darker and more brutal than a superhero movie. The first movie featuring him was the live-action movie from 2005, Constantine, starring Keanu Reeves. It's a pretty average R-rated action flick with a lot of CGI demons. It really feels more like a Keanu Reeves movie first and foremost, and has more in common than John Wick than any other movie I've mentioned. Then, John Constantine has a significant role in the DCAMU. His first appearance is in Justice League Dark. The pitch for this movie is that Batman puts together a team of people to fight supernatural enemies, but Constantine is way more important to the story than Batman is. It's more like a collection of ghostly and demonic characters led by Constantine, who team up to fight supernatural enemies, and Batman is also there too. Then Constantine gets his own solo movie in Constantine's City of Demons. This is another DCAMU movie that digs into his backstory, how he got into the demon hunting business and whatnot. It's pretty cool. Then there's Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. This was a weird one to find a place for in this video. This is the last movie in the DCAMU, one that brings all the characters back for one last hurrah a la Avengers Endgame. Except Constantine is kind of the protagonist of this movie, which is weird because he's far from the most important character in this universe. But that's what we got. All the DC superheroes versus the big bad Darkseid, told from Constantine's point of view. Not that it's a bad thing, this movie's great, and anybody who's watched the majority of the DCAMU movies beforehand will love it. The next obscure DC property to touch on is Swamp Thing. He's a scientist who got turned into a swamp monster. Swamp Thing had a pair of movies come out in the 80s, Swamp Thing and The Return of Swamp Thing. The first movie is a decent B-movie horror flick. The second one, though, turns the campiness up to 11. It's one of those sequels that's basically a parody of what came before. Steel, aka John Henry Irons, is a superhero who runs around with a steel bodysuit and a giant metal hammer. He's based on that old folktale John Henry. He's a pretty deep cut. But somehow, for some reason, we got a Steel movie in the 90s starring Shaquille O'Neal. It's bad. Shaq can't act, the effects are bad, the story is boring. It occasionally dips into so bad it's good territory, but it's not worth anyone's time. That's the only Steel movie, but he also plays a big role in Reign of the Supermen. Jonah Hex is a cowboy who has died and come back to life with a hole in his face and various magic powers. He doesn't cross over with the rest of DC heroes much because his stories take place in the past, in the Old West. In 2010, we got a Jonah Hex movie starring Josh Brolin. This movie bombed hard. I wouldn't say it's terrible, but it's basically a very mediocre western. Then we get into some very interesting territory. The next few movies are part of the Arrowverse. Now, the Arrowverse is the one on-screen DC universe I haven't talked about yet. It's a collection of TV shows on the CW, including Arrow, The Flash, Supergirl, and a whole lot of others. It's mostly just TV shows, but there are a handful of animated movie tie-ins with it. There's Vixen, Freedom Fighters The Ray, and Constantine City of Demons. All three of these movies introduce new heroes to the Arrowverse that go on to make appearances in live action later. And they feature animated versions of major Arrowverse characters. I know what you're thinking. Wait, you already talked about City of Demons. Isn't it a part of the DCAMU? And, yeah. It's complicated. So, the art style and cast for City of Demons matches the DCAMU. The story in the movie doesn't contradict anything in the other movies, but it doesn't directly tie into them either. But Matt Ryan, the voice actor for Constantine in this movie and the rest of the DCAMU, goes on to play the live-action Constantine in various Arrowverse TV shows. So it's kind of in both? Well, it definitely has more ties to the Arrowverse, but watching it as part of the DCAMU helps fill in some backstory after watching Justice League Dark. Back to the other two movies I haven't covered yet. Vixen is a superhero who has the power of every animal on Earth. I like her as a character a lot. So, all of these movies were initially released as a short miniseries that were strung together to make a movie later on. For the others, it doesn't affect the viewing, but for Vixen, it's especially noticeable. The pacing is all over the place. But a benefit to that is that we get to see Vixen in a whole bunch of situations in rapid succession, and you get to know her really well. Freedom Fighters The Ray is about a teen who gets superpowers from an alternate dimension version of himself who fights Nazis. Yeah, a major plot point in this movie is an alternate universe where Nazis rule the world, and the main Arrowverse superheroes are bad guys. It's really cool, and I thought Ray was one of the more interesting one-off characters I've come across in this whole process. Being an Arrowverse TV fan probably helps with understanding these movies, but I haven't seen any of the Arrowverse and I enjoyed them just fine. I'd recommend any of them. Oh, and by the way, Deathstroke Knights and Dragons was made by the same people and has a similar style, but it's definitely standalone. Okay, we're really in the home stretch now. We finished with every movie based on, I guess I'll call it the DC superhero franchise. You know, their interconnected series of superhero comics, the characters that people think of first when they think DC. Well, DC owns other IPs. A lot of them are from other comic book companies that DC later took over. And a lot of them aren't even superheroes. Let's get the final round done. The next few are movies based on the works of Alan Moore. Alan Moore might be the most famous comics writer ever after Stan Lee. He's known for his biting satire and complex themes, almost single-handedly disproving the idea that comic books are dumb kids' stories. These are the movies based on graphic novels that he wrote under DC. Watchmen, V for Vendetta, and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And also he wrote The Killing Joke and created Swamp Thing, but I already talked about those. I'm in an interesting position here, because unlike everything so far, I actually have read these comics. And that really affected my feelings on these movies. See, Alan Moore is a strange guy, and his writings have some really radical and complex ideas that the movies completely skip over. I don't want to be the guy who nags you about how the book was better, but while watching all three of these movies, I couldn't help but think about how Hollywood sanded off most of the source material's rougher edges. Watchmen is easily the best take on the concept of, if superheroes were real, they would be terrible actually, out there. The graphic novel and the movie are both really cool and interesting deconstructions of the superhero genre. The movie cuts out some less important plot lines, but it's generally a faithful adaptation. The V for Vendetta movie is pretty good. It's a story about rebelling against a fascist dystopia, but the movie removes almost all the complexity from the story, and it ends up just being about how fascism is bad. Which, yeah, fascism is bad. But the comic is so much smarter in the way it goes about that same idea. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is easily the worst of these. It's a kind of superhero team, but made up of classic characters from Victorian literature. The comic isn't especially deep or complicated, but the movie turns it into a big dumb action movie. It's a disaster. This movie almost doesn't qualify as DC. It's made by Fox, not Warner Brothers. And the comic series switched from DC to a different publisher before the movie got made. But I'm counting it anyway. Alright, we're on the last few movies now. Just a few miscellaneous movies based on the most obscure graphic novels that DC owns. There's the pair of Red movies, Red and Red 2. That stands for Retired Extremely Dangerous, and they star Bruce Willis as a retired super spy who gets roped into another mission. They're silly action movies with a lot of really good comedy too. John Malkovich is easily the best performance. Road to Perdition is a gritty mafia movie about a hitman and his son on the run across the country, starring Tom Hanks. The Kitchen is about mafia wives in the 70s taking over the business while their husbands are in jail. A History of Violence is about a small-town diner owner who gets harassed by some guys from the Mafia. I thought those last three were all just kind of okay, but I don't love Mafia stories much anyway, so what do I know? The Losers is a silly, over-the-top movie about an elite military squad. I didn't find it very memorable. Then, Stardust is in a complicated situation. The source material by Neil Gaiman is more of a novel with pictures than a comic book. But DC published it, so it counts. The book and the movie are both fantastic fantasy stories that I would recommend to pretty much anyone. And the very, very last movie on the list is Gen 13. The story behind this movie is absolutely crazy. It was made by Disney of all people. The original comic was made by Wildstorm, and Disney got the rights to it to make a movie. But right as they finished the movie, the DC Warner Brothers conglomerate bought Wildstorm. Rather than release a movie promoting a rival company, Disney chose to eat the cost and buried it. It had a very limited release in Europe only, and today it's only available through bootlegs online. But his production history isn't the only weird thing about it. It's about an institute for teens with superpowers, not unlike the X-Men. It looks like your typical 90s Saturday morning cartoon, but it's very adult, very much not appropriate for kids. As a movie, it's pretty average, but as a cultural artifact, it's an incredibly fascinating watch. We're done. After counting them all up, the grand total of official DC movies currently stands at 133. Wow. That number does include things like Death in the Family, the Snyder Cut, the Richard Donner Cut, and Teen Titans Go See Space Jam, which are all alternate versions of other movies, but still, jeez, that's a lot. Alright, so after all of this, what did I learn about DC as a franchise? First, I mentioned this in my Batman video, but it's still true here. There's a disproportionate amount of R and PG-13 rated movies here. A lot of them are targeted towards an adult audience. Looking at DC's general approach to tone and target audience, there's a pretty consistent through line. The live-action movies, the ones that get released in theaters, tend to have a pretty broad appeal, fun for the whole family and with a more watered-down version of the stories from the comics. They exist to introduce new teen and adult viewers to these characters. Then any animated TV show and any movie that connects with it is aimed at younger kids. Then for the hardcore adult fans who are hooked by the live-action movies, cartoons, and/or comics, DC makes lots of more mature animated movies. These movies have more direct ties to comic lore and aren't heavily marketed, since the hardcore fans will seek them out regardless. Also, I noticed that even when movies are part of a longer series, the franchise tends to have a pretty loose continuity. With both the DCEU and the DCAMU, I never got the impression that the movies were in a particular order, or that they were building to anything. It feels more like the studio comes up with a concept for a movie they want to make, and then they fit it into the current running canon afterwards. That's another aspect that makes their universes unfriendly to newcomers. There aren't many good entry points. Most movies throw you in the middle of a character's journey, and even the beginnings of a larger universe are pretty busy right from the start. Another thing I noticed is that DC doesn't have the deepest roster of characters. Yeah, they have a backlog of superheroes that they could use, but based on the content they've produced, it seems like most people only care about Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, and Green Lantern in that order. In more recent years, other characters like Shazam and Aquaman have had a bit of a renaissance as the Hollywood superhero boom has pushed DC to add some variety, but like 95% of what they make relies heavily on those five. Although it was fun learning about DC's B-list and C-list heroes as they popped up every so often. Characters like Martian Manhunter, who only ever seems to appear as a member of the Justice League. Or Green Arrow, who just shows up sometimes to help Batman or somebody else every once in a while. Or Captain Atom, who wears red and blue and has nuclear energy themed powers. Not to be confused with The Atom, who wears red and blue and can shrink really small. Not to be confused with Atom Smasher, who wears red and blue and can grow really big. But back to the main heroes, and really most of the main characters of these movies. They're all way less relatable than the typical story protagonist that I'm used to. Unlike, say, Spider-Man, who under the mask is a relatable, everyday sort of guy, most DC superheroes are stoic, confident, without much inner turmoil. They come across as more like archetypes than actual people most of the time. That's not really a bad thing. Most of the time they make it work. But when I came across a character who had real personal struggles, like the Ray or Jessica Cruz, it was a breath of fresh air. Speaking of archetypes though, I think that's what gives DC superheroes their staying power. I saw so many interpretations of these characters, and sometimes they varied wildly, but I enjoyed most of them. It's that flexibility that's allowed them to last so long. So many modern franchises have one overall canon story, where the writers can't deviate too far from what's been established. But DC doesn't have this problem. They can take their characters in all kinds of directions, and as long as they keep a few essential traits, the audience will go with it. And if you don't like one take on it, well, no biggie, maybe you like the next one. Time for my final recommendations. What DC movies do I think you should watch? Well, I still think Batman is the best DC character, and his movies still sit at the top of my list. The Adam West movie and Mask of the Phantasm are still my all-time favorites. Beyond Batman, though, recommending movies gets hard, because a lot of the best ones really require prior knowledge and experience with these characters to fully appreciate. If you're trying to get into DC for the first time, your best bet is to check out a TV show or two. I'd suggest anything from the Timverse. There have been some great DCAMU movies in recent years that I can easily suggest to a newbie, though. Wonder Woman, Shazam, and The Suicide Squad. And First Light is an easily digestible origin story for Green Lantern. Then when you've checked out some movies or comics or TV shows to see what DC is all about, try The Flashpoint Paradox, Justice League vs. Teen Titans, Crisis on Two Earths, All-Star Superman, and Teen Titans Go to the Movies. Thanks to Warner Brothers owning DC and HBO, at any given time, 80-ish% of these movies are on HBO Max. If you're interested in DC at all, HBO Max is an absolute must-have. Coming up in the next year or so, the DCEU has a few more movies in the works. Plus there's a standalone live-action Batman movie on the way. On the animated side of things, there's basically a new one every 2 to 3 months. Unlike the 2010s, where the majority of animated movies that came out were part of the DCAMU, this new DC Rebirth universe seems to be more of a low-key thing, with a lot more standalone movies coming out around it. I'm sure it'll be out by the time I'm finished with this video, but the next upcoming animated movie is Merry Little Batman, a Christmas-themed Batman movie. Also, there's going to be a theatrically released movie about DC Super Pets. I don't have a clue what that's going to be like, but I'm excited to check it out. By now, I'm in it for the long haul. I'm going to watch every new DC movie that comes out for as long as I live. They won't all be great, but I'll come back to see what new writers do with these characters. And maybe I'll dive into the comics one day. Who knows?
Batmobile, the movie. Coming vroom.
That actually does look pretty good.
I do love the Batman's automobile.
Okay, video's over. You and I need to have a little talk. What is your deal? Why don't you just make the videos the way I want you to? Who are you? I can't see responses yet, obviously, but I'll read them later. But just tell me what your problem is so we can get this sorted out. Because this has to stop, alright?